In my 31 years working as a federal investigator, I developed one rule that never failed me. When your gut tells you something is wrong, it's already too late to ignore it. I retired at 61 with a bad knee, a drawer full of commendations, and the quiet certainty that I had seen the worst humanity had to offer. I moved to a small house outside of Ashford, Virginia, planted a vegetable garden I never quite got around to tending, and told myself the hard days were behind me. I was wrong. My daughter lost her husband 3 years ago. A truck ran a red light on Route 9 November, and just like that, Tyler lost his father and my daughter lost the man she had built her life around. She grieved the way strong people grieve, quietly and without complaint, holding herself together for her son's sake, crying only when she thought no one could hear her. I drove out to see them every weekend for the first year. I brought groceries and fixed things around the house and tried to fill a space I knew I could never actually fill. 14 months after the funeral, my daughter told me she had met someone. His name was Marcus Webb. He owned a real estate development company in Ashford, had his name on 3 office buildings downtown, and coached youth baseball on Saturday mornings. Everyone in town seemed to know him. Everyone seemed to like him. My daughter smiled when she talked about him for the first time in longer than I could remember, and I told myself that was enough. I did not like Marcus Webb the first time I met him. I could not explain it then, and I am not sure I can fully explain it now. He was polished in the way that men who have spent years cultivating an image become polished. He shook my hand too firmly, held eye contact a few seconds longer than felt natural, and laughed at things that were not quite funny. He asked about my career with what felt like rehearsed interest. My daughter was radiant sitting next to him, and I told my gut to be quiet. They married 8 months later. Tyler was 15 by then. He stood in the photographs with a stiff smile that did not reach his eyes, and I filed that away somewhere in the back of my mind and said nothing, because what was there to say? The call came on a Tuesday night in March. I was reading in the kitchen, the way I do most evenings since the house got too quiet, when my phone lit up on the table. It was nearly 11 o'clock. The name on the screen was my grandson's. I answered before the second ring. He did not say hello. The first thing I heard was his breathing, shallow and uneven, the way someone breathes when they have been crying for a long time and are trying to stop. I sat up straight in my chair and felt something ancient and cold settle into my chest. Grandpa. His voice cracked on the second syllable. Tyler. I kept my voice level. 30 years of interview rooms taught me that panic from the person asking questions only closes people off. I'm right here. Talk to me. I'm at Derek's house. Derek was his best friend, lived 3 streets over from my daughter. I ran there. I didn't know where else to go. Are you hurt? A pause. Then quietly. He grabbed me. I hit my head on the corner of the counter when he shoved me. It's not bad. There's a little blood, but it stopped. I was already on my feet, moving toward the door. What happened? He came home late. Mom was already asleep. I was in the kitchen getting water and I don't know. He said I left the back door unlocked again. And he started yelling. And then he grabbed my arm and shoved me and I hit my head. I got out of the house. I didn't want to wake up Mom, because last time I told her he scared me. She said I was being unfair to him and that I needed to try harder. Last time. I stopped with my hand on my jacket. Tyler. Has this happened before? Another pause. Longer this time. Not like this. He's pushed me twice before. Once 3 months ago. Once in January. I didn't tell you because I don't know. I didn't want to cause problems. Mom seems happy. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, I was already thinking clearly again. Listen to me, I said. You did exactly right by leaving. You did exactly right by calling me. I'm on my way to Derek's house right now, and I want you to stay inside until I get there. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Is Derek's mom home? Yeah. Good. Go sit with her. I'll be there in 40 minutes. I drove with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, running through everything he had told me. 31 years had given me a particular way of listening not just to what was said, but to the shape of what was left out. Tyler had said 3 incidents. He had said he did not want to cause problems. He had said his mother told him he was being unfair. Those 3 things assembled themselves into a picture I did not like at all. Derek's mother met me at the door. She was a decent woman, and she had the good sense not to ask many questions. Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table with a bag of frozen peas pressed against the side of his head. The cut was small, maybe an inch, but it had bled enough to stain the collar of his shirt. I sat down across from him and looked at him the way I had looked at witnesses for 3 decades, with my full attention and without judgment, and I asked him to tell me everything from the beginning. He talked for nearly an hour. I did not interrupt him. I let him circle back and contradict himself, and go quiet, and start again, because that is how real accounts come out. They do not come out clean. The whole time he talked, I took notes on a small pad I keep in my jacket pocket out of habit, and the picture that assembled itself was methodical and deeply familiar. Marcus Webb was not a man who lost his temper. Marcus Webb was a man who had learned to use fear as a management tool. The shoves, the late-night confrontations, the way he waited until my daughter was asleep, none of it was impulsive. All of it was calculated. I drove Tyler to the emergency clinic myself. I told him he needed the cut, looked at, and I needed documentation. The nurse who examined him noted the laceration, the mild bruising along his right forearm where he had been grabbed, and a faint contusion near his left shoulder blade from the counter edge. She asked how it happened. I told her I would be filing a report. I asked her to note the time and date carefully. When I brought Tyler back to Derek's house and sat him down, I told him plainly what was going to happen next. "I'm going to go speak to your mother tonight," I said. "Not to upset her, to make sure she knows what I know. Then tomorrow morning I'm going to make some calls. This stops now, Tyler, not eventually. Now." He looked at me with the particular expression that teenagers use when they want to believe something and are not sure they are allowed to. "What if she doesn't believe me again? Then I will provide her with a medical record, a witness, and 31 years of professional experience," I said. "Leave that part to me." I arrived at my daughter's house at 2 in the morning. The lights were off. I rang the bell and knocked until she came downstairs in her robe, alarmed and confused, and I sat with her in the kitchen, and I told her every single thing her son had told me. I did not soften it, and I did not editorialize. I put the clinic paperwork on the table in front of her, and I let her read it. She went through 5 different emotions in about 10 minutes. Disbelief, defensiveness, confusion, grief, and then something quieter and more frightening that I recognized as the look on a person's face when they realize they have known something for a long time without permitting themselves to know it. "He told me Tyler was exaggerating," she said. Her voice had gone very flat. "After January, he sat down with me, and he said Tyler had been giving him attitude for months, that the two of them had been clashing, and that Tyler was over-dramatizing a normal argument between a teenager and a parent. He had this whole explanation, and she stopped. "You wanted to believe him," I said. "Not as an accusation, as a fact." She looked at the table. "I wanted to believe him. I stayed until 4 in the morning, until she had agreed that Tyler would not be returning to that house until I said it was safe, and that she would not be warning Marcus about what I intended to do next. I drove home as the sky started to lighten, and I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and made a list. The next morning I called a former colleague from my years at the federal field office, a woman named Patricia who now ran a private investigation firm in Richmond. I told her what I had and asked for a favor. She told me to give her 48 hours. In the meantime, I did what investigators do when they are working without a badge. I used public records. Marcus Webb's real estate development company, Webb Development Group, had been operating in Ashford for 11 years. On the surface, it looked like a successful mid-sized firm. 4 major commercial projects completed, 2 more under contract, 1 mixed-use residential development currently under construction on the east side of town. His financials were clean enough from the outside. He had good relationships with the County Planning Commission. His name appeared in the local paper, at ribbon cuttings and charity dinners. But when you spend 3 decades looking at documents, you develop a sense for when numbers are being arranged rather than reported. I pulled every public filing I could access. I found 3 LLCs registered under different names at different times, all listing a variation of the same registered agent address. I found a pattern of subcontractors who appeared on one project, disappeared, and then resurfaced under a different LLC name. I found 2 variance applications that had been approved by the county planning board in ways that seemed to contradict standard procedures, both approved within 90 days of significant charitable contributions from web development to a local civic foundation that the planning board chairman also sat on. None of this was conclusive on its own, but it had a shape I recognized. Patricia called me back on the second day. She had found more. Marcus Webb had been investigated 4 years ago by a state contractor licensing board for allegations of bid manipulation on a public works contract in Roanoke County. The investigation had been closed without findings. The investigator assigned to the case had retired 6 months later at 52 unusually early, with a consulting contract from a firm that shared an address with one of Webb's subsidiary LLCs. Patricia had found this by pulling state pension records and cross-referencing them with business filings. It had taken her a day and a half. "This man is careful," she told me. "He's been doing this a long time and he's careful. But careful people still make mistakes when they think they're protected." I asked her to keep going. While she worked, I drove to the Ashford County Sheriff's Department and asked to speak with someone in the Family Services Unit. I presented them with the clinic documentation and Tyler's account. The deputy who met with me was polite and thorough, and by the end of our conversation, I believed she was genuinely concerned. She told me they would be in contact with my daughter and would need to conduct their own interview with Tyler. Before I left, I asked, as casually as I could manage, whether the department had any prior contact with Marcus Webb. She told me she could not share that information. I thanked her and noted the slight hesitation before she said it. Over the following week, I built a file. Patricia sent me documents. I compiled records. I drew out the network of LLCs and payments and political connections on 3 sheets of paper taped together on my kitchen table, the way I had built cases for 3 decades, working from the outside in, following the money until it told me where it was going. What it told me was this: Marcus Webb had been systematically overbilling county contracts for 4 years, using a rotating series of shell subcontractors to move money out of project budgets and into accounts he controlled. The total amount was difficult to calculate precisely from public records, but my best estimate was somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million over 4 years. He had kept the county planning chairman cooperative through the Civic Foundation donations. He had kept himself insulated from the mechanics of the fraud through layers of business entities that would take a forensic accountant weeks to fully trace. The assault on my grandson was, in the grand scheme of what Marcus Webb had done, a relatively minor crime. But it was the crack in the surface. It was the thing he had done that could be proven quickly, documented cleanly, and that would require law enforcement to look at him more closely than he had ever been forced to endure. On a Friday morning, 3 weeks after Tyler's call, I drove to the Richmond field office of the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit. I had called ahead. I had a former colleague there, a man who had worked under me for 6 years. I brought my files, my records, Patricia's documentation, and the clinic paperwork. I sat in a conference room for 4 hours, and I walked 2 investigators through everything I had assembled. At the end of the 4 hours, one of them leaned back in her chair and said, "You put this together in 3 weeks?" "I had good help," I said. "And I was motivated." She nodded slowly. "We're going to need to verify all of this independently." "I know," I said. "I would expect nothing less." That same afternoon, the Ashford County Sheriff's Department formally charged Marcus Webb with 1 count of assault and battery and 1 count of child abuse. He was processed and released on bond within 6 hours. His attorney released a statement describing the charges as the result of a family dispute being mischaracterized. My daughter did not speak to him after the charges were filed. She had not spoken to him since the night I sat with her at her kitchen table. She had moved Tyler into the guest room at Derek's mother's house temporarily, and she had retained an attorney of her own. She was not the same woman she had been before that night, but in some ways she was more herself than I had seen her in years. Grief had softened her edges in ways that had made her vulnerable to a man who specialized in finding vulnerable people. Tyler came to stay with me for 2 weeks while things settled. We ate dinner together every night and watched baseball, and I taught him how to use a table saw, which was something I had been meaning to do for 2 years. On the 3rd night, sitting on the back porch after dinner, he asked me how I had known what to do. I didn't always know, I told him. The first night, I only knew two things: that you were scared and that you were telling me the truth. Everything else came from that. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I almost didn't call you. I didn't want to bother you. I looked at him. Tyler, for the rest of your life, if you are ever scared and you don't know where else to turn, you call me. That is the only rule that matters. He nodded. After a while, he said, "Do you think Mom is going to be okay?" "Yes," I said. "It's going to take time. But yes." The Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation into Webb Development Group 6 weeks after my visit to Richmond. A forensic accounting team was brought in. 3 of Webb's former subcontractors agreed to cooperate with investigators. The county planning chairman resigned from his position in April, citing personal reasons. His resignation was accepted without public comment. Marcus Webb's attorney tried twice to have the criminal charges related to Tyler reduced or dismissed, arguing that the incident was being inflated for purposes related to the civil divorce proceedings my daughter had by then initiated. Both motions were denied. The judge reviewing the second motion noted, in her written ruling, that the medical documentation was clear, the witness testimony was consistent, and the suggestion that a 15-year-old boy with a laceration and documented bruising was fabricating a complaint for strategic reasons was not supported by any evidence before the court. I was sitting in the back of the courtroom when she read that ruling. I am not a man who shows much on his face, but I will tell you that I felt the particular satisfaction that only comes from watching a system work the way it is supposed to work, not easily, not automatically, but with enough persistence from the right people pushing at the right places. The assault conviction came down in August. Marcus Webb was sentenced to 18 months, with 12 suspended and mandatory counseling. His attorney was already negotiating the financial crimes case with the AG's office by then. The estimates I had put together at my kitchen table turned out to be conservative. The forensic accountants found closer to $1.6 million moved through the shell company network over 5 years. The county, once they understood the full scope of what had been taken, pursued civil recovery. The planning chairman was separately indicted for accepting benefits in exchange for official acts. 2 members of Webb's inner circle cooperated fully in exchange for reduced charges. On a Saturday morning in September, I drove out to my daughter's house. She had gotten a court order requiring Marcus to vacate, and she had spent 2 months putting the house back together the way she wanted it. She had repainted the living room a dark green that she liked, and that Marcus had always said was too somber. She had moved furniture around. She had put up photographs that she had taken down during the marriage because Marcus had found them cluttered. Tyler was in the backyard, throwing a baseball against the return net I had bought him the previous spring. He looked taller than he had in March. Teenagers do that. They grow in ways you don't notice until you step back. My daughter made coffee and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had sat with her at 2 in the morning in March, and we talked the way we had not quite managed to talk since she remarried, about her father, about her husband's accident, about what she wanted her life to look like now. She cried once, briefly, and then she straightened up and said she was tired of grieving things she could not change and ready to focus on what she still had. I told her that sounded right to me. On the drive home, I thought about the particular nature of the work I had spent my career doing. People tend to think of investigation as being about finding hidden things, secrets buried underneath official stories, truth concealed beneath lies. And that is part of it. But the larger part, the part that takes longest to learn, is simply the willingness to keep looking when it would be easier to stop. Most people, when they sense something is wrong, perform a brief internal calculation about whether the cost of pursuing it is worth the trouble, and then they find reasons to move on. The thing that makes an investigator is not cleverness or experience or access to records. It is the refusal to make that calculation. My grandson called me because he was out of options, because the people who should have been his protection had either failed him or been made to doubt him, because at 15 years old, alone in his friend's kitchen in the middle of the night with blood on his collar, he had decided that I was the last person left who might believe him. I have had commendations on my wall and letters from federal offices and citations from 3 different directors. None of them mean to me what it means that he called. There is a photograph on my kitchen table now, Tyler and me on the back porch, taken by my daughter on the Saturday in September, when she had the green living room and the repositioned furniture and the 2 months of slow rebuilding behind her. Tyler is grinning the way 16-year-olds grin when they don't know a photo is being taken. I am looking at him instead of the camera. I keep it there because some mornings the house is very quiet, and I need the reminder that the hard days are not behind me. They are the days I am still living, and they are the days that matter. He made captain last spring, Tyler, captain of the junior varsity baseball team at Ashford High School. He called to tell me the same way he called that night in March. Late, a little out of breath, voice cracking slightly, but different, very different.